The idea of dictatorship, or the fear of one, has become a hot topic in American politics this week. With Donald Trump making steady progress toward becoming the Republican presidential nominee, his critics are growing louder. Neoconservative scholar Robert Kagan wrote in the Washington Post that the chances of the United States falling into dictatorship have significantly increased. Liz Cheney, a former Republican congresswoman who has been a strong critic of Trump, warned on CBS that the U.S. was sleepwalking into dictatorship. Trump, as expected, shrugged off these warnings, calling them just another example of Trump derangement syndrome. But things took a turn during a town hall meeting in Iowa on Tuesday night. Trump, who has often praised authoritarian leaders like Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, seemed to add fuel to the fire. Some news outlets reported that Trump had confirmed his critics' worst fears, that he would act like a dictator if re-elected as president. However, the situation was a bit more complicated. Fox News host Sean Hannity tried to give Trump a chance to deny that he would misuse his power to punish his enemies, something Trump has hinted at in the past. Are you promising America tonight that you would never use this power for revenge against anyone? Hannity asked, hoping for a clear answer. But Trump, in his usual style, played with the line between joking and being serious. He said he wouldn't misuse his power, except for day one of his next term in office. This comment, which could be taken as either a joke or a warning, left many people wondering just how far Trump might go if he were to be president again. It highlighted the complex and often confusing nature of Trump's words, which continue to spark strong feelings on both sides. Donald Trump has promised that, if re-elected, he would take bold, unilateral actions on issues like border security and energy production, famously saying he would drill, drill, drill. He tried to reassure the public by adding, "After that, I'm not a dictator." However, this vague promise hasn't done much to ease the concerns of his critics across the political spectrum. Many of these critics argue that a second Trump term would severely test American democracy because there would be fewer safeguards in place. They point out that Trump himself has spoken about using the Justice Department as a weapon and replacing civil servants with loyalists who wouldn't question his decisions. They also warned that this time, Trump wouldn't have experienced cabinet members who might push back against his more extreme proposals. In response, a Trump super PAC fired back, claiming that the real authoritarian is President Joe Biden. The group, Make America Great Again, Inc., stated in an email that Joe Biden abuses his power to target journalists, politicians, activists, and concerned parents. One of Trump's Republican rivals, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, shared his concerns with the BBC's Americast. Hutchinson warned that, while Trump might not fully embrace the label of dictator, a second term could bring dangerously authoritarian behavior. He explained that an authoritarian president tends to accumulate power, ignoring Congress, the courts, and the judiciary, leading to a concentration of power in one branch of government, a direct contradiction to the principles on which the United States was founded. What Hutchinson said next could be troubling for Joe Biden's re-election campaign. If the 2024 election comes down to a contest between Trump and Biden, as many expect, Hutchinson admitted that he wouldn't support Biden over Trump. Instead, he would look for a different option. In both the 2020 election and the early months of his 2024 campaign, Biden tried to position himself as a candidate who would appeal to disaffected Republicans, independents, and members of his party. But even with the fear of an autocratic candidate like Trump looming, Hutchinson wouldn't consider backing the incumbent Democrat. While public opinion polls a year before the election might not be the most reliable indicators, recent surveys suggest that a Trump-Biden matchup would be close. Hutchinson's search for an alternative candidate likely reflects the sentiments of other voters, who are also uneasy about the choices before them. This raises concerns for Biden, who must secure broader support if he wants to win re-election in what could be a highly competitive race. As the political landscape in the United States grows increasingly polarized, the emergence of alternative candidates could further complicate the 2024 presidential race. The centrist political group, No Labels, is contemplating putting forth a moderate candidate, while figures like Liz Cheney are considering independent bids. This presents disillusioned voters with other options on the ballot, potentially pulling support away from the majority party candidates. For President Joe Biden, this scenario is particularly precarious. In an election where every vote counts, the presence of strong third-party or independent candidates could siphon off crucial support. This isn't just a concern for Biden. According to some of Trump's most vocal critics on the right, it's also a perilous situation for the country. Neoconservative scholar Robert Kagan, in a thought-provoking essay for The Washington Post, argues that Trump is closer to reclaiming the presidency than many people realize. He suggests that Trump's support within the Republican Party, combined with the current national mood, could propel him back into the White House. Kagan warns that if Trump wins, his second term could be marked by even more dangerous and authoritarian actions than before. Kagan foresees Trump and his allies conducting a campaign of persecution, targeting those they perceive as enemies. He fears that many Americans might stand by passively as this unfolds. Despite these dire predictions, millions of Trump supporters and other Americans don't share this view. They see Trump as a leader who can restore what they believe has been lost. As the 2024 election approaches, there is a real possibility that a significant portion of the electorate will choose to return Trump to the presidency, ignoring the warnings of scholars like Kagan. The prospect of Trump's return, coupled with the potential for a fragmented vote due to independent and third-party candidates, makes this election one of the most uncertain in recent history. The stakes are high, not just for the candidates, but for the future direction of the country itself. As the 2024 presidential race heats up, it's becoming increasingly clear that President Biden and the Democrats are likely to frame this election as a battle for the soul of the American democracy. They will argue that the stakes go beyond typical partisan differences, emphasizing that the very foundation of the democratic system is at risk. This narrative will likely position Biden as the protector of democratic values, contrasting him sharply with former President Trump, whose rhetoric and actions have sparked fears of authoritarianism. Trump, on the other hand, seems to be intentionally provoking this response. Whether through his praise of autocratic leaders or his offhand comments about wielding power, he is pushing the boundaries of political discourse. By flirting with the idea of being a dictator, even in jest, Trump is baiting Democrats into making this election a referendum on democracy itself. This strategy is risky but calculated. Trump's provocative statements might energize his base, who view his defiance as a sign of strength and independence from the political establishment. Meanwhile, the Democrats are expected to respond by highlighting the dangers of a second Trump term, portraying it as a potential threat to the democratic institutions that have long defined the United States. In this high-stakes election, the framing of the debate could be just as important as the issues themselves. If Biden and the Democrats successfully convince voters that democracy is on the line, it could galvanize support among those concerned about the country's future. However, if Trump's strategy resonates with voters, who are frustrated with the status quo, the election could take a very different turn. This dynamic sets the stage for a contentious and deeply consequential campaign, with both sides attempting to define what the election is truly about. Furthermore, examining the underpinnings of American democracy to grasp how serious Trump's assertions were, founded on the idea of freedom, equality, and rule-based decision-making, it is against this rhetoric that the U.S. has taken solace as an indomitable kingdom holding tight to its pillars to ward off would-be despots. The nation's history, from the Revolutionary War to the civil rights struggles, has proven that our democracy may be fragile at times, but it is susceptible and malleable only up to a tragic point. The notion that America could become a dictatorship would have been implausible a few short decades ago, it seems. The Constitution, and its system of checks and balances, was forged over 200 years ago to limit the abuse of power by any individual or collective part of government. But as history teaches, democracies are inherently fragile entities, and much as liberal democracy in the current global environment is being threatened elsewhere by a new strain of authoritarianism that drives TikTok propaganda machines, capable not only of targeting an individual, but an entire generation. In the 20th and early 21st centuries, most nations regressed under authoritarian leadership. The danger signals are often subtle at first: a declining free press, the politicization of the judiciary, and the silencing of dissent. In the long term, however, such acts lead to erosion of democratic norms, giving rise to autocratic rule. These lines appeal to a deep-seated fear many Americans have. But do Trump's declarations stand up? Donald Trump's presidency was marked by unprecedented polarization and controversy. From the outset, his unorthodox approach to governance challenged long-standing norms. His rhetoric often targeted the media, the judiciary, and his political opponents, leading to accusations that he was undermining the very institutions that uphold American democracy. Trump's style of leadership was seen by many as a direct challenge to democratic norms. His frequent attacks on the press, the judiciary, and even members of his party raised concerns about his commitment to the principles of democracy. However, it's important to note that during his time in office, the U.S. government continued to function as a democracy, with checks and balances in place. As Trump's presidency progressed, his claims of being unfairly targeted by the deep state and a rigged system became more pronounced. These claims culminated in his refusal to concede the 2020 presidential election, despite multiple courts and election officials affirming its legitimacy. Trump's insistence that the election was stolen from him became a rallying cry for his supporters, leading to one of the most significant challenges to American democracy in recent history, the storming of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. The events of January 6, 2021 shocked the world. What began as a rally in support of Trump's claims of a stolen election quickly escalated into an attack on the very heart of American democracy. The images of rioters breaching the Capitol, attacking law enforcement, and threatening elected officials are seared into the national consciousness. For many, this was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of how fragile democracy can be. Trump's claims that the United States is on the path to becoming a dictatorship have resonated with many of his supporters. But what evidence is there to support such a dramatic assertion? Are these claims rooted in reality, or are they part of a broader political strategy? The idea that the U.S. is becoming a dictatorship is a serious accusation. To assess this claim, we need to look at whether the fundamental institutions of democracy are being undermined. While there have been concerning trends, such as attempts to weaken the judiciary or suppress the press, the U.S. remains a functioning democracy with a robust system of checks and balances. However, the rhetoric of dictatorship can be powerful, especially when used to rally support or stoke fear. Despite the heated rhetoric, the U.S. remains a democracy. The legislative process continues, the courts operate independently, and the media, despite its challenges, remains free to criticize those in power. Yet the polarization and mistrust that have grown in recent years raise questions about the future. Could the erosion of trust in these institutions lead to a weakening of democracy itself? In the world of politics, words matter. The rhetoric used by leaders can shape public opinion, influence policy, and even alter the course of history. Trump's claims of dictatorship, whether based in fact or not, serve a strategic purpose. They rally his base, create a sense of urgency, and position him as a defender of democracy against a perceived threat. Trump's rhetoric is a powerful tool. By claiming that the U.S. is becoming a dictatorship, he taps into the fears and anxieties of his supporters. This strategy isn't about winning elections. It's about maintaining influence and control over the political narrative. However, this kind of rhetoric also has the potential to further polarize the country and undermine trust in the democratic institutions.